The Eastern Himalayas is at a biogeographical crossroads, creating a huge range of diversity. The report, bringing together work by researchers over more than a decade, reflects the need for a renewed plan to combat climate change when government leaders meet in Copenhagen in December.
We could take what's happening in the Eastern Himalayas to the discussions in Copenhagen at the end of the year, where world leaders are discussing the future of climate change on the planet, because together with the poles we are seeing faster climate change there than the global average. So we have an example, a real life here and now example of how climate change is already beginning to affect a large chunk of the Earth.
Scientists in general are agreed that what happens at the two poles and in regions such as the Himalayas are critical to the global environment, not least in terms of water supply.
It's not just about do we need to save a certain beetle or a certain snake. If you think about what the Himalayan area provides, it provides water to something like 1 in 5 of all people on this planet. So as we see the glaciers retreat further, and we already have evidence that 80% of them are retreating, what does that mean for water availability for that 1.3 billion people? So yes, now is the time when global leaders have to respond, and they have to respond in line with what the science tells us.
Among the discoveries of hitherto unknown species are a bright green frog and a pit viper, a snake so called because it has a tiny pit at the front of its head. The region is also home to thousands of species already known and could be under threat from climate change.
It's really hard to predict, not because we don't know what will happen with climate change. What we don't know is how adaptable these species are. We're not just talking about the 350 new species, we're talking about the 11,000 plus species that exist there that we knew about already. So what we can't afford to do is treat life like a lottery and saying, we can't sit back and say, okay, some species will be winners, some will be losers, and hold our hands up. What we have to say is, we have been the leading force behind this damage, and of course for those people who live in the Himalayas, this isn't a problem of their making. This is a problem created by and large by people in the West. We have a moral responsibility to try and maintain it, or at least to slow the rate of change so that species and people can adapt.
The World Wildlife Fund has launched a Climate for Life campaign to highlight the plight of the Himalayas. It is also working with local communities to help them adapt to changing conditions. The organisation is calling for governments to agree to a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from industrialised nations by 2020.
The air above us isn't UK air. We share our atmosphere with everybody else on the planet. This is no longer our problem. It is a global problem. It requires a global response, and it requires, frankly, global leadership. Unless we get that, we will be shortchanging future generations.
The Copenhagen talks on climate change will bring the leaders of the developed world together in December. The World Wildlife Fund urges them to provide a coordinated and meaningful response.